Alrighty, guys, if you have been following this channel for a little bit, you know one of the biggest changes that have gone on in the world of the shows and movies that we follow, specifically the MCU over the past few years, has been their strategy of TV. In fact, this channel, the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, has gone all the way back, and we're not that old, relatively speaking, I'd like to think, but still almost exactly 5 years old. And I remember covering every single episode of WandaVision as it came out, the very first MCU Disney Plus show. About 4.5 years later, we are in this position now where the MCU has changed, right? The MCU has taken a bit of a decline going forward. And look, I will say, and you can go watch my rewatch videos where I rewatched every single project in Phase 4, and the more I look back on it, the more I think Phase 4 was really not the problem with the MCU. It was emblematic of some of the problems that were beginning to burgeon as the MCU grew and grew. But I don't think Phase 4 was as bad as people remember. In fact, I think almost all of 2021 was still pretty much up to caliber with the MCU. Black Widow was fine. Shang-Chi was great. I liked Eternals, even though the vast majority of people didn't really love Eternals. I think everyone loved Spider-Man No Way Home. And for the shows, WandaVision was great. Falcon and Winter Soldier, I didn't love as much. Loki, people liked a little bit more than me, but I still enjoyed it for what it was. And Hawkeye, I actually really enjoyed, right? So I think that, the shows, right? The shows in quality were maybe not the problem. But I think even though those shows were good, one of the big problems that had begun to emerge at that point was the fact that people now not only had to spend their money and time going to the theaters to watch most MCU entries to keep up. That had been a refrain even when the MCU was at its peak, right? People were like, do I really need to watch Thor Ragnarok and Black Panther and Spider-Man Homecoming to watch Infinity War? And the answer was not really, but it's almost like skipping maybe the 16th, 17th, and 18th episode of a sitcom and then jumping to the 22nd episode, which is the finale, and being like, I'll just get there, Like, you wouldn't be the most confused. You could pick it up from there, but it's still, I think worth investing your time to watch those other episodes so you're following along. That's just my personal opinion. But basically, having all of these Avengers, right? Having the TV shows basically interchangeable in terms of MCU's story with the movies, I think was a problem. Because people didn't have time to watch Falcon and Winter Soldier leading into Captain America Brave New World. People didn't really watch WandaVision. A lot of people did, relatively speaking. But still, there were a lot of people who didn't watch WandaVision going into Doctor Strange 2 and were very confused as to what was going on. I think that when Loki shows up in Avengers Doomsday, they're going to have a lot of explaining to do as to why he's there. Or else risk alienating a large part of the audience. So the MCU TV strategy has been changing. And now, with the success of Daredevil Born Again, I think that the MCU is finally realizing that it needs to go in a separate direction, because now Brad Winterbaum, who is the head of Marvel's television, has admitted as such and said that the MCU television shows will no longer headline marquee Avengers. Vision Quest will be the last series in the MCU for a long while that will feature a marquee MCU character. So this is what he had to say in doing an article with The Hollywood Reporter. First of all, he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the success of Daredevil Born Again gave MCU Brain Trust the confidence to go forward and make annualized shows with second seasons and third seasons in mind, as long as those shows are successful, and perhaps releasing 1 or 2 new live-action series a year with those annualized shows. So Daredevil Born Again looks like it's going to be continuing for a good long while, which is exciting. And then speaking to the strategy moving forward, this is what Winterbaum had to say. Quote, producing shows with marquee names, it made it really challenging to produce second seasons. The margins on TV are smaller. Looking into the future, does it mean that we won't have big Avengers names? No. They may not be the titular character of the show, but they can still make appearances. You should be able to watch these shows on their own without knowing the overall MCU story, but if it's not connected, it's severing what makes the MCU the MCU. Some people might have problems with that second part there, being like, why can't you just make standalone shows? And I get that. I totally get that. And I think that there are plenty of ways in which the MCU can make standalone projects that don't need to connect to the wider universe in a larger, grander sense. I think even, for the most part, Agatha All Along was an example of this. Daredevil Born Again, maybe, right? Although a lot of things were happening in parallel with New York and in Thunderbolts and Daredevil Born Again that I don't know, maybe. But anyways, I think that this is the exact right lesson that you should be taking away from this. Honestly, I'm thrilled that this is the lesson that they're taking away, because one of the things I watch every single TV show, I watch every single thing that comes out from the MCU. I'm one of those people who, when Wanda shows up in Doctor Strange 2, I'm like, I know exactly where she is emotionally, mentally, like, let's go. Let's go. Most people aren't, right? Most people aren't, and that's okay. That's totally okay. I've been saying for a long time, how are people going to know where Sam Wilson has been between Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or between Avengers Endgame and Captain America Brave New World, if they haven't seen Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I still think that it was a relatively smooth transition, because maybe you watch Endgame and he gets handed the shield and you're like, okay, he's Captain America now. Maybe, but still. I think it's a challenge, right? And so moving forward, I think if the lesson is we still need to connect it to the MCU in a certain sense. Because I agree. I think that if you're just going to start breaking canon and just making your own thing, just make the multiverse stories. You don't need them to be a part of the MCU. So, loosely connect them to the MCU. Like, make sure people know that they're in the same world. That's fine and all, right? If Kamala Khan shows up in Daredevil Born Again Season 2, I wouldn't be opposed to that, as long as it fits the story, right? If you can take away one thing from my least favorite episode of Daredevil Born Again Season 1 with the Kamala Khan, Mr. Khan episode, that's great. But you don't need Daredevil Born Again to be required viewing for the MCU moving forward. I think we talked about this a few weeks ago with Kevin Feige and his new strategy for the MCU. So I think this is a great thing, and I think it would be awesome. Like once in a while in a they were thinking about Nova, and they were thinking about Strange Academy or whatever, and once in a while Doctor Strange shows up in Strange Academy. That's great. And Nova, maybe Star-Lord shows up for a little while. I think that would be really, really fun. So I'm excited to see what goes on here, and I think that this is a really good lesson to be taking away from the last few years of the MCU in television. Guys, what do you think about Brad Winterbaum's comments that moving forward, we won't have any MCU television shows with the marquee Avengers? They're going to be saved for the movies, but doesn't mean that they're not connected to the MCU in general. Let me know in the comments down below.